welcome to the High Line, everybody. This is the south end where you can enter. On weekends you had to have a reservation, which you can do in the moment, but today on a weekday you can just walk on up the steps and experience the most visited tourist site in New York City now, Public Garden on a raised railway. Really amazing to see how big all these trees have gotten. I've been visiting the High Line, I don't know, for 5 or 6 years. And from year to year, I'm amazed at how these gray birches, how big they've gotten over time. And they look so amazing. And they look good year round. That's the thing with this landscape. There's never a time when it isn't interesting and dynamic. And it certainly serves this great purpose of connecting a huge swath of space on the west side, and you don't have to navigate traffic, and you have this beautiful scenery to make your walk so much more pleasant. So one of the plants that's really kind of showing off right now is one of Pete Oldhoff's selections. This is Stacky's Humelo, named for his home in the Netherlands. And you might think of Stacky's as the silver lamb's ear, and these are relatives, they're just different species, and I think this one is so much prettier. This is great, cone-shaped flowers, really great for pollinators, really drought tolerant once established, and does well in sun to shade. You see there's lots of different color variations. I'm making an assumption here. I'm thinking that's because they have seeded and naturalized. In addition to having a great herbaceous layer, including things like Amsonia here and asters, and of course lots of carex. For me, the really enchanting part of this garden is the woody layer, and it's just so awesome to see things like clethra in full bloom, and of course the use of these birches, which is really dynamic. Over there, things like Cotinus. So I just think this is a garden that really can inspire everyone, whether you're urban, suburban, out in the countryside. There's something for everyone here. One of the most dynamic plants in the landscape right now are these rattlesnake master. And this is a great patch mixed in with coneflowers, and then Lespedeza behind it, Amsonia to the right. Different times a year, all these plants come together to make a really incredible, colorful, textural combination. Of course, scaffolding is a huge part of New York City in general, and walking the High Line, every time I've been here, there have been different sections scaffolded off due to construction. All the buildings, that's really amazing how the buildingscape has changed as a result of the creation of this garden. Just so you can see how close Little Island is, it's literally across the street from the High Line. So you can't come to one and not go to the other. This extra wetlands section, including the very invasive but always interesting equisetum. It's really great to see it here mixed in with native hibiscus. Just do really well throughout these raised beds. See, they're encased metal beds. And then this backdrop of roofs. Coming up on one of my favorite areas. This is like the water feature that you can walk through and cool off. It's really fun to see kids playing in it. Of course, lined by beautiful plants. You can sit here and get your feet wet, enjoy your experience. much construction happening around here. So known as sumac. It has these great movable seating areas for people to lounge, enjoy themselves, particularly when it's not so hot out. Like today, it's perfect. Amazing, all the consideration for shade. We were here on Sunday when it was hot and sunny, and every one of these benches was full. It's a great place to cool off. A few stories above the street. Here's a little section that's not currently being maintained. This is more reminiscent of what it would have looked like before the park was created. Kind of overrun with both native and non-native species of plants, including, things like this clematis vine that are literally just running amok through everything. So there's a big difference between what would be here naturally versus how it's being maintained. And that to me is the real definition of a garden. Again, you see this area that, the clematis is crazy, and, different plants that have less boundaries, I guess, is what you see growing here. And that's the important role that the gardeners play to maintain and really, strike a balance between intentional and non-intentional. I don't know anything about the architect who did this, but I think these are really cool. I like these. And they're right here on the High Line. And I'm sure it's like many, many millions of dollars. But these are really cool. See here, one of my favorite plants, Pycnanthemum, mountain mint. You have a couple different species. Castrum coming along there, and lots of Amsonia. The Amsonia would have bloomed in the spring, and then it really puts on an incredible fall show with its bright yellow foliage. You see Nadia mixed in. Well, it's just really like a painter's palette of interesting plants. Hey everybody, I found a friend!
Hi everyone.
Introduce yourself.
Giselle Vidarte, working at the High Line right now. Gardener here, used to be at NYBG, met Bree at Chanticleer, Pennsylvania, so really happy to bump into her here. Did a double take.
You have a lot of horticulture heritage in your experience.
We were pretty lucky in our studies. Ooh, High Line stuff. It was really great bumping into her, and always happy to see your face.
I'm so happy to see you. Oh my God. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, more watering to do.
And maybe it'll water from the sky.
I hope so. Yeah, we're waiting for it.
So here we are in an area that's become really shaded, and that's because this amazing witch hazel, look how big it is, two right here, planted in the rails, and then check out this redbud. Y'all remember, we're on an elevated rail platform, and this I just think is such a testament for the power of plants and what they're capable of doing. None of the redbuds that we have planted in the ground are anywhere near this size. My garden is older than the High Line. Another tree, noteworthy tree here is this Aesculus. It's just creating, this incredible dynamic background. It's old flower stalks. Fothergilla underneath it. And then as we open up into more sun, great, herbaceous ground cover, plain sambucus right there. Different rubus species. There's actually Coralopsis in the back there. One of my favorite deciduous flowering shrubs for the spring. And then we're getting into the area with all the sassafras. And the sassafras are so amazing. Like, I love this dwarf one. I'm assuming this is because it's been pruned. You see that compared to a natural open habit. Of course, sassafras get some of the most amazing fall color. It's the only rose I've seen on the Highline, and it's fragrant and wonderful. I'm not a rose person, I've confessed this in the past, but this is a rose that I could really get behind. I don't know what it is, but it smells like roses are supposed to. And this is definitely my favorite bench as a result of the placement of this rose. And of course a dogwood above it. So in talking to Giselle, we're having a discussion about high maintenance lawns, and here's the original lawn space at the Highline that's kind of been let go natural because of the pandemic. They weren't here to maintain it. I'm really glad they have some signage about it. Personally, I think it's more interesting like this instead of being perfect fescue space. This is not a golf course. It shouldn't look like that, you know? But again, lawns are more work than garden beds. And I will argue that until the end. It's so much more maintenance to try and maintain a monoculture of turf grass compared to biologically diverse range of trees, shrubs, and herbaceous species. Not only, it's more interesting to look at. One of my favorite plants is Calamintha nepeta. It smells so good. It's really practical because deer don't eat it. Deer aren't an issue here on the Highline. But I really like it mixed here with, you know, panicum and whatever grass this is.
I'm not there to pay for it. Yeah.
Of course, the skyline around here has changed drastically as Hudson Yards gets developed. Well, we're coming into one of my favorite sections of the Highline, which I like to call Magnolia Grove. There's also a ton of sassafras planted in here. Great layer, ground plane layer down below. But here we have Magnolia macrophyllus, which my only claim to anything on the Highline is that way back when I actually grew these from seed. They were sold to a nurseryman in Tennessee who grew them out ball and burlap and then shipped them here for this project. But I really love the idea that I actually started all these magnolias. And there's a lot of them. So we'll walk around and show you some of the really exemplary species. You see how big the leaves are. Magnolia macrophylla, the big leaf magnolia. They have super fragrant flowers, and in here they're mixed in with Magnolia virginiana, which some of those are actually blooming right now. The macrophyllas have probably finished about 3 weeks ago. You might recognize these from the Philly Flower Show exhibit that I was involved in. That's because the designer that I was helping actually was the first director of operations here at the Highline. And so his installation for the habitat theme at the Philly Flower Show was very much based in the design of the Highline and the role that it's played in creating a new urban habitat. This is one of my favorite ground plane views. all that heuchera, ferns, tiarella. It's just a really beautiful, shady combination. Remember, we are not on ground plane, which makes it that much more dynamic and interesting. It's not every day that you get to look down on a big leaf magnolia and see it from this juxtaposition. It's so tropical, and it's native to the southeast. Another famous, very recognizable building by Zaza Hadid. I actually read online there's only 38 condos in this beautiful building. So they must be pretty big for New York City standards. Some information. Alma Allen is the sculpture artist who created this beautiful display. Really like this art installation, and I especially like the Hyperion, which is in bloom right now. That bright yellow, it's so beautiful. St. John's Port. These pieces are really dynamic and super interesting with this building here. First time I came to Highline, this was under construction, and none of those shiny buildings were here. Changed a lot. It's going to continue to change. I think what's so inspirational is that it was a garden and the role of horticulture that ultimately inspired all of this development. Pollinators are a huge driving force. I haven't seen any butterflies. You know, I don't know enough about urban spaces, especially up, not at ground plane, but there are certainly bees taking advantage of fabulous native flowering plants like Asclepias tuberosa, one of my favorites for growing through the summer season. I hope you've enjoyed these impromptu tours of Little Island and the High Line here in the west side of New York City in Chelsea. All right. We're gonna go find a restaurant and hopefully avoid the downpour that is heading our way. Thanks for watching, everybody.